The flight from London to New York was routine, or at least it seemed that way when Flight 918 took off under a pale morning sky. The passengers settled into their seats, seatbelts clicked, flight attendants smiled politely, and the engines roared the plane upward. Among them sat Daniel Reeves, a man in his mid-40s, traveling alone. He looked ordinary, faded jacket, tired eyes, a simple paperback novel clutched in his hand. No one paid him much attention. To the world, he was just another passenger in row 15, seat A. But Daniel carried something no one could see, a past wrapped in shadows, a story he never spoke of. Hours into the flight, somewhere over the icy expanse of the North Atlantic, turbulence rattled the plane. The cabin lights flickered, a nervous hush fell over the passengers. Then the intercom crackled, and the captain's voice came through, trembling, uncertain. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing technical difficulties. Please remain calm." A wave of whispers surged. A woman clutched her child closer. An elderly man closed his eyes and began to pray softly. Daniel looked out the window, nothing but endless clouds and the cold blue ocean far below. Then it happened. A sudden, violent shudder threw drinks from trays and jolted passengers against their seatbelts. Oxygen masks dangled from the ceiling. Panic erupted. And in the chaos, Daniel Reeves, row 15A, was gone. His seat empty, his novel on the floor, his jacket crumpled, but no trace of him. People screamed. Flight attendants rushed up and down the aisles. "Where did he go? Someone check the lavatory!" But every search turned up nothing. The man had vanished into thin air, 35,000 feet above the Atlantic. Confusion gripped the cabin. How could a man disappear midair? The flight attendants whispered frantically into radios, checking every corner. The captain demanded answers. Some passengers swore they saw him only moments before. Others insisted he'd been acting strangely since boarding, as if waiting for something. His bag, still tucked in the overhead bin, contained nothing unusual, just clothes, a toothbrush, and a passport with his name, Daniel Reeves. A young woman in row 14 whispered, "It's impossible, people don't just vanish." But impossible was already happening. Outside, the storm grew. Lightning crackled across the sky, illuminating terrified faces. The aircraft shuddered, warning alarms bleeding from the cockpit. The captain came over the intercom again, his voice taut. "We need everyone to remain calm. We are working to stabilize the situation." But calm was impossible. Fear had a grip on every heart. Then, as if the mystery weren't enough, another shock rattled the cabin. The cockpit door cracked open, and Daniel Reeves stood there. His jacket was gone, his eyes sharper, focused, alive in a way no one had seen before. The crew froze, passengers gasped. "How did he?" one stewardess stammered. Daniel spoke firmly to the captain. "You don't know me. You don't have to. But if you want this plane on the ground in one piece, you'll let me help." The captain's eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" Daniel's answer was quiet but carried weight. "Former Special Operations. Call sign Ghost. I know planes, and I know storms like this. You've got a systems failure, and you're minutes from losing control." The cabin erupted in murmurs. Some thought he was insane. Others clung desperately to hope. Because in that moment, Daniel Reeves, who had disappeared, was back, and he wasn't ordinary anymore. Daniel slid into the co-pilot's seat with the confidence of someone who had once stared death in the face and refused to blink. The captain hesitated but finally nodded. Desperation left no room for doubt. Warning lights screamed across the cockpit. Autopilot was offline, hydraulics sluggish, and one engine fluctuating. Storm clouds twisted around them like a dark maze. Daniel's hands moved quickly, adjusting power, reading instruments, fighting the turbulence. Memories flooded back, missions over war zones, flying with soldiers who trusted him with their lives. He had left that world years ago after a mission had gone horribly wrong, costing his team their lives. Guilt had driven him into silence, into shadows, into anonymity. But here, 35,000 feet in the air, there was no hiding. The plane lurched violently, throwing passengers against their seats. Screams filled the cabin. Daniel steadied the controls, his voice calm and steady. "I need you to trust me. I've done this before." The captain, pale and sweating, glanced at him. "You're not supposed to be here." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Neither is death." Outside, lightning flashed like artillery fire, illuminating a sea of terrified faces pressed against windows. A child whimpered, clutching a teddy bear. An old woman whispered prayers. And in the midst of it all, whispers spread again. "That's him. The man who disappeared. He's flying the plane." For the first time in years, Daniel Reeves felt his pulse align with purpose. He wasn't running anymore. He was fighting, not for himself, but for everyone strapped into that fragile metal bird tearing through the storm. Hours seemed to collapse into minutes. Every adjustment Daniel made felt like wrestling with an invisible giant. The aircraft groaned, rattled, fought against him. Sweat ran down his temples, but his grip on the controls never faltered. In the cabin, chaos gave way to a fragile silence. Passengers clung to armrests, hands intertwined, eyes fixed on the ceiling as if heaven itself might intervene. But it wasn't heaven, it was a man they barely knew. A man who had reappeared when hope had vanished. The captain leaned back, exhausted. "How are you even doing this?" Daniel's voice was firm. "Because once, I promised my team I'd never let anyone fall from the sky again. I broke that promise. Tonight I make it right." The plane dipped sharply, oxygen mask swaying. Daniel wrestled it back, using every ounce of strength. The radio crackled to life. Air traffic control feigned through the static. "Flight 918, respond. We've lost you on radar." Daniel grabbed the mic. "This is Ghost. Former Spec Ops at controls. We need emergency clearance to land. Fuel critical, systems failing." A stunned pause, then a reply. "Copy that. Ghost. You're cleared. Runway lights engaged." Far below, through the storm, a faint ribbon of light appeared, the coastal base runway, glowing like salvation. But crosswinds slammed the plane, trying to shove it aside. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Not today," he muttered. The passengers prayed harder. The descent was brutal. Wind tore at the wings, alarms blared, and the fuselage shuddered like it might rip apart. Daniel's arms ached, but he held firm. Every movement was a battle. Tilt too sharp and the plane would tear apart, too soft and they'd miss the runway entirely. In row 14, the young woman whispered again, tears in her eyes. "Is he even real? Or an angel?" Her neighbor, clutching his chest, answered hoarsely. "Does it matter? He's saving us." The runway grew larger, seconds away. Daniel steadied his breath, voice calm as steel. "Brace." The wheels hit the asphalt hard, once, then again, bouncing violently. Passengers screamed, the plane tilted, skidded sideways. Daniel fought with everything left in him. Reverse thrusters roared, brakes screeched, sparks flew. The plane shook, screamed, rattled, until finally, miraculously, it slowed. Rolled. Stopped. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then, like a dam breaking, applause, sobs, and cheers filled the cabin. People reached out, clapping, crying, clinging to each other. The captain's eyes filled with tears as he turned to Daniel. "You just saved 300 lives." Daniel's hands trembled on the controls. He whispered back, "No. They saved me." When the cabin doors opened, night air rushed in, carrying the scent of rain and earth. Passengers filed out, some on shaky legs, others weeping with relief. Many reached to touch Daniel's hand as they passed, whispering, "Thank you," calling him a hero. But he didn't see himself that way. On the tarmac, a little boy ran up and hugged him tightly around the waist. "You came back," the boy said softly, as if he had been waiting for him all along. Daniel's throat tightened. He placed a hand on the child's shoulder, unable to speak. For years he had disappeared, burying himself under guilt and shadows. But tonight, fate had forced him to return. Not for glory. Not for recognition. But for redemption. As flashing lights from emergency vehicles painted the runway red and blue, Daniel Reeves, ghost, walked into the darkness beyond the crowd, vanishing once again. But this time, he didn't vanish in shame. He vanished as a man reborn. And for the passengers of Flight 918, the story would never fade. They would tell it again and again, the story of the passenger who disappeared at 35,000 feet, and returned not as a ghost, but as the hero who gave them back their lives.